You're listening to episode 46 of the Confident Writer podcast with Jane Pike. Hello, beautiful human. I am going to start this episode by taking a beautiful deep breath in and a delicious long breath out. And I invite you to do exactly the same wherever it is you might find yourself listening to this right now, taking another big breath in and letting it all out on the exhale. That is the way to start. So, the next important point is, just moments ago in my mailbox landed the most delectable parcel that I have ever had the pleasure of receiving, and it involved white chocolate covered raspberries. Now, when I opened the packet, it wasn't what I expected. They looked like little speckled eggs, and on putting the first one into my mouth, I realized that I was going to need to draw on more self-control than I have ever needed to draw on before. Because frankly, left to my own devices, the thought did pop across my mind that maybe no one would notice that this had actually been dropped off, and perhaps I could actually hide these away and pretend that they never happened. And as a consequence, just open my mouth and drop that entire packet of chocolate-covered raspberries down my throat. Such was the magnificence of that experience. Now, the reason that this has been delivered to me is because I am on day, whatever day it is, of self-isolation. I got back from Australia last Tuesday. It's Sunday here at the time of recording, so I got back last Tuesday, and the Sunday prior, New Zealand announced that anyone who came from countries that were listed, Australia was one of them, that we needed to go into 14 days of self-isolation. So that resulted in this amazing experience in my letterbox. And I have to say, the kindness from people around me in terms of dropping off packages, in terms of checking if there's things that we need, has been so overwhelming, and I'm completely full of gratitude for all of that love that exists around. The take-home message: check them out. I can't remember what they're called. I think my eyes went into some kind of glaze when I looked at the packet, and I just basically reached in, and the explosion in my mouth caused my entire consciousness to go to a new level. And as a consequence, I can't actually remember the name. So maybe I'll put it in the show notes. It seems like an important thing to add to the show notes right now. All of us, only for the antioxidant properties, all of us could use some white chocolate covered raspberries. So as a public service, I will put that in the box and you can share, in the show notes, and you can share in that amazing experience. So obviously, given that we are in the middle of a pandemic, starting with white chocolate coated raspberries seemed like the obvious launch pad to begin from. But it does indirectly lead me into something really important, and that is self-care, finding the joy, and making sure that you are looking after yourself. And there are so many conversations, so much confusion, so much concern and panic and fear around that it becomes almost a full-time job for us to be able to establish our own autonomy. What I mean by establishing our own autonomy is actually deciding how it is we want to show up in the world. It is checking in and finding that groundedness within us, finding that centeredness within us that can be destabilized quite easily when so many powerful forces are oscillating around us. But the importance of that is needed on so many levels. It is necessary on so many levels. But what I'm going to start with, aside from the chocolate-coloured raspberries, it seems like we're starting a lot, but what I want to start with the actual conversation that we're going to have today, is a reflection that I have been musing over the last few days, which has really anchored me to a good place. And I'm hoping that sharing this with you will allow you to do the same. So, I have always mused over events in history. I've looked at different world wars. I've looked at different situations which have come up. And in my own working history, I have been an emergency aid relief worker. But during that time, I had no family of my own. I had no children that I was worried about. And so your sense of independence and concern is obviously greatly magnified when you have people around you that you're concerned about also. So during those times when I've been in situations watching families struggle through, and I myself was dropping in and dropping out, I wondered how it would be that I would respond in those situations. And I've looked back at events in history and thought, who would I be in that context? Would I be one of these people that I admire and say, wow, look at that bravery, or look at how she showed up in the midst of everything that was going on around her? Would I be one of those people that just hid under my pillow and hoped that it went away? Would I join the pack because that felt like the safest and easiest thing to do at the time? Like, what would my response be? So in my lifetime, this is probably the most extreme, most, what is even the word? Like bizarre, unusual, uncertain period that we've gone through, and as a consequence, the one where I get to reflect in my present and say, you know those things you've always thought about, Jane? Well, this is your chance to step up. If you want to look back in 5 years' time at this period and say, I'm really glad I did that, or that was the way that I wanted to be, or that was the way that I wished I'd be, this is the time to write the story right now. Like where your feet are standing on the ground right now, this is the time to decide how it is you want to show up. And it ties in directly to how I've always thought about emotions or being states. And in Joyride, you guys will be familiar with me referring to these as transformables, meaning like, what are the transformable elements of being that we can actually practice and bring into our day? For instance, if we were to use the example of bravery or confidence, obviously, something that I'm talking about a lot in relation to our horses. And I don't see confidence as a destination that we arrive at. I see confidence as a generative activity where we actually practice confidence. So when I go out with my horses, I'm thinking to myself, how is it that I'm going to practice confidence today? What is it that I need to be confident in this setting? And that's not so much about a suppression, or it's not at all about a suppression or a denial of what it is that I am feeling in that moment if it's the opposite of confidence, but instead it's an opportunity for integration for me to say, okay, I recognize that this is what's present, and I'm going to work with the alchemy of my emotions to move that through to a better feeling place. But also within that context, I recognize that there is more that is available to me. I recognize that there are opportunities all the time for me to step into my confidence and to actually practice that as a being state. This need to draw on our competencies is really, really important right now. We are very easily seduced by our vulnerabilities, and there's a lot of talk about vulnerability and the need to be vulnerable, which I couldn't agree with more. However, the disclaimer that I want to put up is that it's very easy to focus on your vulnerabilities at the expense of your strengths. To say, this is how I feel anxious, I feel nervous, I feel despairing even, whatever it is that comes up in the context of your reality right now, it's easy to go down that rabbit hole and forget that that also coexists with a huge amount of possibility, that also coexists with skills that you have, that exists with your ability to step up and offer something, that exists with your ability to be brave. So it's possible to be those things which we see as vulnerable and also step into the things that are also expressive of our competencies. That's really, really important. So for me, when I sat down and I had that first wave, like I think many of us have kind of been caught out in that we've gone to this place where it was like, it's just the flu, it's fine, or it's in a faraway place that's not near me. It's not going to come here. It'll never get to that. And we've made our jokes and shared our memes, and then progressively it's got a little bit more serious and you start to feel maybe that little tweak of uneasiness, but you're like, whatever, it's going to go away. And then all of a sudden things are coming, stuff's getting real, and you're like, whoa, okay, this has kind of blindsided me emotionally, even though we saw this train coming from a while back. So I think that's where I felt that first wave, and I was like, that first wave of reality of like, this is really a thing that's going to affect all of us. And the phenomenon has been that it is so globally reaching. Like in so many ways, we have never been more connected than we are now. We have never shared so much as we are now. The geographical borders have never mattered so little as they do now. And so there's a huge opportunity within that to collectively step into a braver, more, more sympathetic, more kind, more empathetic, more sharing place, if we choose to. But that is an individual decision that feeds into the whole. And so what I decided in that place was, if I become what it is I'm witnessing, if I become the panic, if I become the despair, if I become the fear, then I am useless to everyone that I hope to serve and show up for, and I'm useless to myself. If I fuse into that experience, then I go to a place that is not constructive and I am unable to access what it is that I can actually do to positively help the situation. So if you can look at it this way, most of us are in a preparatory or preventative situation. That's the situation that we're in now. We are concerned about what may happen if we were to come in contact with the virus, for instance. However, we recognize that the measures that we are taking is largely preventative. I here on my property, I know that the chances of me coming into contact with someone unwell is actually very low. However, it's possible in my body to feel the sense of panic through the story that I'm creating around it, through the concern that I'm marinating in. And in my central nervous system, it is possible right now, as I speak to you, for me to create a feeling in my body that feels like life and death. Now, we're going to get into that in a moment because this is such a key point. It's the key point, actually, the key point. But what I want you to decide is to transfer yourself. I think this makes the decision slightly more clear. To transfer yourself to 1 year's, 5 years' time in the future, and to give yourself that ability to look back. So that if you were to time travel through space and time and drop yourself into the future, look back and say, how is it that I would be proud? What is it that I would be proud to see from this vantage point? For me, it was I wanted to see myself really just getting out there and sharing what I knew, because I am in the blessed position to have been doing this work for a really long time. And I don't mean doing the work of like pandemic prevention. I just mean mental skills, emotional skills, being anchored to a place of safety within your own system. That's my gig. That is what I do. And so I recognize that if ever there was a time to actually get out there and share what it is that I know, it is now. I can choose to retract, I can choose to panic, but those things do not serve me and they certainly don't serve anyone else. So for me, every day when I'm waking up, I say to myself, who is it that I want to be today? I want to be brave. And I don't mean like Braveheart, like charging into battle, but I want to make brave decisions. And brave decisions for me involve not letting myself go to that place where anxiety or worry overwhelm me. I am absolutely falling in and out of discomfort in my body. Absolutely. But it's not about never going to a place that is, not representative of the ideal. It's just, we're human. We're not supposing that we're able to develop these superhuman powers all of a sudden, although maybe. But really, it's about recognizing, having that awareness in your system that if I am to go to that place, this is how I feel, and this is how I bring myself back. The emotional contagion that is out there currently is on rocket fuel. You only have to go to the supermarket and see how quickly your reactivity activates and how quickly you can feel adrenalized when you go to an environment where everyone is fused into the same experience. So let me explain what it is that I mean. If you go to the supermarket now and you see someone panic buying at the supermarket, you can have entered the supermarket from a very rational and grounded place, but having the experience of watching someone fill their trolley to the brim and then watching another person fill their trolley to the brim activates in you this need to be part of the pack. This is a very primal need, right? This is not something that we've invented. Our need to be part of a community, to be part of a tribe, is one of our base instincts. And according to our central nervous system, us being an outlier, meaning that we're somehow missing information or we're being left behind or somehow we are not being taken care of in the same way as everyone else, feels like a very threatening place to live, a very threatening place to be. And if you don't have skills to firstly recognize when you're in the midst of that experience, and then secondly, bring your body back to a place of calm where you can cultivate a sense of safety within your system, then you feel that escalation. And what we actually are creating is trauma. We're creating a traumatic response within our psyches, within our neurology, that is being carried through to future places. This work, the work of being able to calm your central nervous system, the work of being able to remain emotionally and neurologically autonomous in that you are able to calm yourself, you're able to decide how it is you want to be and act from that place, is a future-proofing exercise, because what we are in the midst of at the moment is actually a traumatic experience. It is very easy to feel traumatized right now. And what is important to recognize is there are going to be future effects of this that are carried forward if we aren't constantly upskilling and looking at ways to look after ourselves right now. So let's talk a little bit about the trauma cycle, because I don't want this to be a scary podcast. This is not about doom and gloom. It's about just the awareness, because awareness is key. And actually the skills that we can utilize to calm and do what it is that I'm talking about are very simply applied. This is stuff that I'm going through in Joyride all the time. So if you're in a position where you're able to do so, I am on the money right now with the Joyride peeps and really in there just giving it all I've got to make sure that we are well equipped to see and ride this wave through. So first up, trauma cycle. Let's use the example of the saber-toothed tiger. Let's pretend that I am out there in the wilds of wherever is native to a saber-toothed tiger. That information I can't give you. But the saber-toothed tiger is on my tail. Now, in response to that, if I was functioning from a very normal place, I would experience fear. And that fear would be really useful to me in that moment. What that fear would do would liberate a huge amount of energy into my system. It would liberate adrenaline, it would liberate all sorts of things which activated my flight response. Now, in response to that, I'm able to run faster, I'm able to make decisions that are very specific to the threat, meaning that the normal cognitive processes in my mind are overridden. So I'm not sitting there thinking, should I go or should I stay? My body just go, we go straight into flight mode. And I utilize that energy, that liberation of energy, in order to get me to safety. Now, presuming that I ran the saber-toothed tiger, or actually did manage to get myself to a safe place, what would happen then is a dissipation of the energy. I'd actually utilized a lot of it and I'd got myself to safe harbor. And so I can get back to a position where I rest and reset. Now, what happens in the case of trauma is that we experience a stimulus like the saber-toothed tiger. We recognize that there is a huge amount of adrenaline that is liberated in the system, a huge amount of energy, if you just think about it as a liberation of energy. And what's happening is if we can't find a way, if our normal functions are overridden, in that we can't find the way and means to liberate that energy from our system and to get back to that rest and reset place, then what happens is we're left with this chronic activation. We're in this place where our nervous system has gone up a notch. launch, and we are vibrating literally at a whole new level. Now, if you can think of it, I'm talking in very black and white terms, and these obviously aren't the correct terms that we would use in a scientific context. But I think from a understanding point of view, it's very useful to think of it in terms of energy up. So we have a stimulus, we have an extreme energy up within that process where the liberation of fear in the system has caused us to, feel all the feelings that fear gives us. And then when that's not dissipated, we are functioning at a higher level of nervous excitement or nervous anticipation. And then that kind of courses around our nervous system until something in the environment causes it to be triggered. So my level of tension, my level of nervous excitement, and if we think of nervous excitement as being kind of nervous activation, my nervous activation is constantly humming in the background. And then if I go to the supermarket and I see someone pouring things into their trolley, I might feel an instant wave of panic. Or perhaps I watch something on the news, or perhaps my loved one says something to me that I take out of context and I snap their head off. All of those sorts of things are examples of us being in this state of chronic nervous activation or excitement and just firing off whatever situation tends to trigger it. I hope this is making sense because this is a really important point. So if you aren't coming back to zero, if, for instance, the saber-toothed tiger comes in, you experience a level of nervous excitement that sends you up to, say, 50 points, and all of a sudden, instead of hovering at baseline 0, you're now hovering at baseline 50, you can see that the level of activation in your system is only going to increase at the detriment of pretty much everything, at the detriment of your physical health, at the detriment of your emotional and mental health. And so what is required is the ability to recognize when that charge is activated and to be able to rest and reset on a very neurological and physical level. The saber-toothed tiger example is relevant but kind of irrelevant at the same time for obvious reasons. But the reason why it's also irrelevant is that we have the capacity to activate this nervous excitement through mental stimulation only. Meaning that if we understand anxiety as an emotion of the future, if we understand that our ability to ruminate and imaginate on specific future events can also create the feeling of fear or concern within our system, then you can see how we're constantly triggering ourselves to go into this activated state, but we aren't dissipating that energy at the same time. So the future-proofing process of trauma involves us firstly recognizing when we're going into an activated place and realizing that if we don't do something to dissipate that energy has to go somewhere. It doesn't just leach out of its own accord, it mutates. And this is where we get the emotional transition or the emotional... What was the word that I used last time? I can't remember. I did a podcast a week before last on it and the word's completely gone out of my mind. Basically, when one emotion moves into something else. So we have the movement of anxiety into anger, for instance. We need to discharge. That's the word I'm looking for. We need to discharge the energy from our system in some way. And if we don't have tools to do that in a constructive manner, then we just search for whatever it is that's available. The need to control then, the need to overtly control our environment comes down to an inability to control our internal environment. So if you're finding yourself obsessing over things in your outer world, obsessing, for instance, the supermarket is a really good example of this, and I know I've mentioned this a few times, but that need to shop till you drop, hoarding, really getting on board with everything you can grab, that is an outward manifestation of the need for control. But actually, all that is symptomatic of is this constant activation within the system that has no outlet. And so when we're unable to firstly be aware of it and secondly utilize that energy to constructive purpose, then we do stuff which really doesn't make sense. Getting angry. So you might find yourself being very short-tempered or doing or responding in ways that just aren't really like you. You might find yourself obsessively cleaning or watching the news, doing anything which to your mind feels like you are exerting some form of control over the situation. What I want you to do is take a deep breath now and actually remind yourself that it's possible to create a sense of safety within your nervous system. It's possible for you to bring yourself back down and activate or deactivate energy as it is moving through your body in ways that are useful to you. And if you commit to the practices that allow you to do that, you are making sure that firstly, you are allowing yourself to feel what it is that you need to feel. You are accepting of what it is that you need to feel. And you are cycling with the flow of emotions as opposed to against them. So let's talk about what you can do in very simplistic terms to bring yourself back down to calm. Bringing yourself back down to calm recognizes that as I sit here or as I am in the midst of an experience, I know for all intents and purposes I am safe. What I mean by that is this. We know that there is the threat of the virus out there. That is why all of us are going through these preparatory measures right now. We also know that it's possible for us to create a feeling of life and death in our body just by thinking about it. And that when we are in that space, we are not useful to ourselves, we're not useful to anyone around us, and it actually isn't a useful space to operate from. So the very first thing we need to do is to remind ourselves or to create an internal and neurological sense of safety. And we do that by getting out of our heads and dropping back into our bodies. So you might in the first instance, and if you're able to do this together with me now, provided that you're not driving or operating any sort of heavy machinery or anything like that, what I want you to do is you can keep your eyes open if you're more comfortable to do that. But if you're comfortable to close them, then close them. And I just want you to scan through your body and recognize any areas of tension or any sensation that you might feel. And I don't want you to label this in any way. I just want you to become aware of it purely as a sensual experience. So for instance, if I was to close my eyes right now, I might recognize that I have a little bit of tension in my tummy. I might recognize that I have a little tightness in my shoulders. And I can simultaneously understand that it's possible for me to stay in the direct experience of what it is that's going on without adding to it or creating a story around it. Where we escalate or exaggerate things is by adding the story. But if we allow ourselves to feel what it is that we need to feel and what it is that we are feeling, and saying, I completely accept how I feel now, it's completely okay to feel how it is I feel now, then you can rest in that place without expanding it into something that is either not useful or bigger than actually what is presenting right now. So we'll start with that. Just a body scan. Checking in with the sensation, checking in with the feeling, and resisting any desire to narrate what that means or create some form of story or narrative around it. And you can actually say out loud or in your head, I completely accept how I feel right now. I completely accept how I feel. And from that place, I'd like you to just get in touch with your natural breath. So you're not trying to change or modify the breath in any way. You're just becoming aware of the breath as it enters and leaves your body. Natural breath. And then starting to take a slightly deeper breath. So I want you to keep your shoulders really relaxed, just allowing them to sink down away from your ears. I want you to invite a slightly deeper breath in and then just allow for a long extended exhale. Good. A few more times, just taking a slightly deeper breath. And a long breath out. One more time, breath in. And then breathing out. Beautiful. So staying with the breath, now I'd like you to place a hand on your chest and just getting a sense of where your heart is. We don't need to be too specific about this. You're more just allowing your hand to rest in that heart space. And now, still with an awareness on the breath, I'd like you to start breathing in and out through your heart. So you're imagining that the in-breath is drawing into this heart space right now. And as you exhale, the breath is moving out of this heart space. So you're breathing into the heart space, exhaling out of the heart space. Breathing into the heart space, exhaling out of the heart space. Breathing in, intention, visualization on the heart, exhaling from the heart. Good. Couple more breaths in this way. Beautiful. Now just releasing your hand, allowing again for the natural breath. And I want you to indulge in what I refer to as a sensory bath, meaning that you're going to really engage your senses and allow yourself to focus on each sense individually for a few moments. So we might begin with the sense of touch and just noticing anything that your body may be in contact with right now. So if you're sitting on a chair, you might become aware of your thighs, your hips and buttocks making contact with the chair, the way that your legs hang down and the way that your feet rest on the ground. If you're lying or if you're standing, just becoming aware of how your body is positioned in space. If you're outside, you might feel a breeze on your skin or the feeling of your feet on the earth. And then thinking about what you hear in your environment right now, without judgment. Just listening to sounds that are close to you, and then expanding your field of awareness to take in things which are further afield in your environment. And if you have your eyes closed, just opening them and observing what it is that's around you. And think of doing this with soft eyes so that your peripheral awareness expands and you may get a sense of even being able to see slightly behind you, such is the softness of your vision. And then you might check in with how you feel, just again noticing any feelings or sensations in the body without labeling them as good or bad, positive or negative, just allowing them to be. And then again, just placing a hand on your heart, or both hands if you prefer, and saying to yourself, it's safe to be in my body right now. It's safe to be in my body right now. I am safe. So this practice that we just did, the breath is called the heart breath. It's an example of a coherent breathing technique, which has been shown to equalize or harmonize heart and brain activity. And when you are in a coherent state, you are in your optimal state. So it's a beautiful breath to check in with, and one that we can expand our intention around depending on how developed we would like it to be. The second is a sensory bath that just drops us out of our minds, because when we go to this place of feeling panic or concern, it is a situation of chopping ourselves off at the head. We disembody, basically, and what we want to do is really drop back into our bodies, remind ourselves that it's safe to be in our bodies, and to become sensorily aware again. From this place, you can ask yourself a really good question, and that might be, what is the right thing for me to do right now? Or what is the next best thing for me to do right now? Or you might check in with that intentional question if you use this as a practice of deliberately setting yourself up for the day, where you can say, how is it that I want to be today? Who is it that I want to be, and how will that dictate how I navigate the world over the next little while? So that's a practice of re-embodiment. It's a practice of calming your central nervous system and providing yourself with a sense of safety. And we are seduced into thinking that worry and anxiety and panic and all of those things serve some kind of protective function. That if we're not constantly hypervigilant about what's going on, if we're not constantly feeding our minds with the news that maybe we're going to miss something, maybe we're going to be left out, maybe we're in a position of increased vulnerability that we wouldn't be if we were incessantly and obsessively checking what it is that's going on. But we know that not to be true. We know that the healthiest and most useful place we can operate from, whether we are ill or not, is one of relaxation, one of groundedness, and one where we're actually inside our own bodies. When you are activated in that way, when you are constantly on alert and reactive to everything that's going on in your environment, your immune system is compromised, you lose the ability to make decisions which are in your best interest. And right now, this is a time that really calls for us to be creative. This is a time which really calls for us to be grounded and centered. So you have a huge opportunity in this moment to be part of the solution. A huge opportunity to decide how you want things to be and to contribute to the world in a really positive way. And I am super passionate about this right now. Self-care then feeds into it. Along with this worry, along with this concern and all of this hypervigilance, which again seduces us into thinking that that serves some kind of protective function. The other thing is a divorce from joy. It's very easy to divorce ourselves from joy. And the reason that we think that is the right thing to do is that for some of us, we recognize that our suffering isn't as great as other people's suffering. So it feels wrong in some way to actually feel good about feeling good, right? And so we develop a huge amount of camaraderie through shared suffering. But what I want to offer is this. If we are in a position where creativity is not only called for, it is an absolute necessity. If we are in that position where what is needed in the world is people who are able to help out, people who are able to support people who perhaps aren't in a position to be able to do that themselves, people who are able to contribute to finding solutions and looking at ways of re-establishing what it is that we all want in a way that's outside of the box, then we need to be coming from a place of centeredness, and we need actually the joy. We understand that if we're contributing to this collective consciousness, that our suffering does not mean that someone else won't suffer. What I mean by that is if your neighbor is suffering, you suffering does not help your neighbor. You suffering actually helps to pull your neighbor down because you are no longer in a position where you're able to offer any help. You are no longer in the position of the highest service. You are no longer in a position where you are actually able to contribute on a higher level of consciousness to things that is needed out there right now. And so the biggest service you can do is actually to look after yourself. So aside from the joy element, the self-care element is so key. And I think for me, one of the things that I've really noticed as a positive side effect, if there are any, of what it is that's going on, is that I have become laser focused on what it is that is important. I know what it is that keeps me grounded and centered, and I am prioritizing them like that is my full-time job. So when I get up in the morning, I'm doing a Qigong practice, I'm doing a yoga practice, I meditate, I surround myself with the good stuff, because I know if I don't do that, me showing up in the way that I need to show up is not sustainable. And I've recognized those days where I've gone to the sources which actually pull me away from what it is that I need to be doing, when I've indulged myself in practices which feed worry and fear and anxiety, and I am not useful. I am not useful to myself. Not only does it feel horrendous, but then as a mum, as a wife, as everything else, I'm just not a fun person to be around. So I recognize that even if it feels like it's self-indulgent, which it never is, but even if it feels that way, you looking after yourself right now is the highest service you can give to anyone. And I truly believe, I'm going to say this, that it is our global responsibility to do so. If you are in a position where you're able to look after yourself right now, then please take it. Please take it, because it is such an important element of healing. It is such an important element of being able to do the things that we need to do. And even if you're in a position where you're compromised, meaning that your work might be affected, and I'm talking obviously separate to health and wellness, but if your work might be affected, if your circumstances with your horse might be affected, if your living arrangements might be affected, you going down the rabbit hole of feeling horrendous is not going to help you seek out the solutions that you need to find. We need to be part of the solution. We need to be part of the solution, and that starts with self-care. That starts with really checking in and saying, you know what? I'm going to remind myself that I'm safe. I'm going to do the practices that bring me back to that sense of safety when I fall off the bandwagon. I'm going to take responsibility for myself and decide how it is that I want to show up, and recognize that is a practice. And then I'm going to use that as the backbone for my decisions and actions, so that I am not left trying to navigate the mood of the moment by whatever it is that's going on around me. So at the moment, obviously, a lot of our routines have gone a little bit haywire. A lot of us are working from home when we're not used to that. A lot of us have kids at home when we're not used to that. And so there are things which have been thrown into the mix which add another a layer of pressure to the situation. What I'm doing at the start of every week is just looking at the things which are inside my control and influence. So those self-care practices that I mentioned, the practices of being kind to myself, because I understand that more flexibility is needed right now, and how it is that I need to navigate my day in order to make sure that that emotional stability is maintained. So for you, what I'd like you to look at is, what is it that actually I can do that has a constructive effect on how it is that I feel, that allows me to set up a framework of operation that gives some semblance of control over my time and the situation, and actually allows me to use this as an opportunity, because I'm going to throw in there the fact that a lot of us have time available to us now that hasn't been available before. It might not be in the circumstances that we want it to be, but still we've often mentioned out loud, I wish I had more time to do X, Y, and Z. So engage in those things, because now is the moment. If you're able to, get those books, look at those courses, sign up for that online training, do what it is that you can do to actually engage your mind, because that is a really, really important facet of the process. Feeling like you're nourishing yourself, feeling like there is some form of progress and sustainability and movement forward, even if that's not demonstrated in your environment. That's a really important thing to hook into individually. And it's something that I'm definitely seeking out for myself. So just to recap, I know we've it's been a little bit of a stream of consciousness, but in the first instance, giving yourself a sense of safety, being able to provide yourself with a sense of safety. Do that heart breath, use the sensory bath, make sure that you're re-embodying yourself and reminding yourself that how it is you feel, even if it doesn't feel like that, is a choice. I can choose how I respond to this situation. I can choose how it is that I show up. Self-care has to be a priority right now. If we are in this for the long haul, if we need to be or want to be part of the solution, if we want to be the people that are there to serve and to be the lighthouses in this situation, we have to make sure that we're looking after ourselves. Seek out or be aware of the things that actually bolster you in that direction, which actually help you, but also be aware of the things that don't. For instance, I know if I watch the news or if I'm really indiscriminate in my social media consumption, that I can go to camp crappy pretty quickly. And we don't want to be doing that. So eliminate or cut down on the things that aren't necessary for your mental, emotional, and physical health. Bolster the things that are, and just be really proactive in creating a buffer around you, which allows you to obviously just show up in the way that you need to. I know I keep mentioning that. Now, this doesn't mean ignoring the facts. This doesn't mean not taking practical action. But for instance, in relation to the news, I'm not wanting to be completely ignorant about what's happening in the situation. It's not about that at all. But I know that constantly feeding myself a stream of data all day is also not useful. So our Prime Minister gives an address each afternoon on the situation. I tune in for that, or I catch up on the recording of it later. And I know that everything that I need to know is going to be in that. I don't then need to look at all the local news sites with their opinion articles or inflationary articles on different aspects of what it is that's going on. I just take the information factually, I apply what I need to do as a result of that knowledge, and then the rest of the time I'm just focused on what it is that I can do to show up in the best way possible and to do my work and to be a good human within the situation. And I really think that's something that we're all capable of doing. So please prioritize that. Please know that there is help out there if you need it. I have done a free 5-day series called Be the Wellness. If you jump on my website, confidentwriter.online, there are tutorials and sessions every day that go for up to an hour. There is a lot of information in there and worksheets that you can download. So if you're wanting to get on board with this stuff, that is such a great resource that's available to you. It's completely free. And as well, Joyride, I am so proud of my Joyriders right now. I think that everything we've been doing has really served us well coming into this moment, and the community support is so apparent right now. So if you feel like you need that, if you want to get on board with this stuff and you're like, I need an ally, I'm totally here for you. You can have a look at that at confidentwriter.online/joyride. But the most important thing is, please look after you. Please take self-care as a priority right now, because we all need that of you. We all need that of you. We need to be contributing to the wider circle of good stuff that is being sent out there right now, which is necessary on every level. And I, for one, send you an enormous hug. I know that's not socially appropriate right now, but you can receive it virtually wherever it is that you're standing, sitting, or lying, and sending you all of the love, which is always appropriate. So until we're catching up next week, hit me up if you've got any questions. Let me know what's going on. Please feel free to share this with anyone you think will be interested or will find value from it, and I will catch you on the flip side. We are all in this together. Kia kaha, let's do this.